Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. We have an exciting day ahead of us in Brussels as leaders of all 27 EU member states are gathering there today for the Western Balkans Summit. The event precedes the European Council on Thursday and is meant to breathe new life into the relations between the European Union and the Balkan countries. Our reporter Kazimierz Łysiak has more.
Leaders of Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia and Kosovo are coming here to Brussels to meet with leaders of all 27 EU member states for the Western Balkans Summit, and they will be discussing money, funding for the region, for the Western Balkans, as part of the growth plan, the program of the EU to incentivize these countries in the Western Balkans to introduce pro-European reforms. That's the way of the EU to extend a helping hand to the region on their path to joining the EU in the future. Now, the discussions here will be about, of course, the funding, but also on the backs of everyone's minds is the EU enlargement. So in the future, all these countries could potentially join the EU, as most of them already have the EU candidate status. This summit has been organized by the new president of the European Council, António Costa from Portugal, who has taken over from Charles Michel as the president of the European Council. Now, just not to confuse you, we have been talking here on TVP World for the past several weeks about the Polish presidency in the Council of the European Union. That's a different institution than the European Council, as the European Council comprises of all leaders of the member states, and these are prime ministers and presidents. And the Council of the European Union is made up of ministers from all member states. So it's a different thing here today. We are still waiting for the arrivals of all the leaders and the official greetings, and later in the day, after the plenary session, there will be a press conference from the President of the European Council, António Costa, and President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. So overall, a lot of discussions about money, about funding for the Western Balkans and the future of these countries on their path to joining the European Union. This is, of course, all happening on the backdrop of increased Russian influence in the region, Russian meddling in Europe. So it's especially important for the EU to strengthen these relations with the Western Balkan countries. From Brussels, TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte met with Željka Cvijanović, the chair of the rotating presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina at the NATO headquarters in Brussels on Wednesday. Speaking at a joint press conference, the NATO chief reiterated the alliance's support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
NATO has been committed to Bosnia and Herzegovina for almost 3 decades. As we approach the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Agreement next year, our commitment to Bosnia and Herzegovina and to regional stability remains firm. We strongly support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of your country. A stable and secure Bosnia and Herzegovina and a peaceful Western Balkans are in our strategic interest. I welcome today's meeting to discuss together how to further strengthen our cooperation and build on NATO's long-lasting support to your country's armed forces and defense and security reforms through the implementation of our defense capacity building package and through the daily efforts of our headquarters in Sarajevo and our newly established political engagement support cell. These efforts are for the benefit of all of your citizens, and they are complementary to your country's EU accession process, which, as you know, we fully support.
Serbia and Kosovo have reached an agreement to implement a declaration aimed at resolving the fate of more than 1,600 still missing people following the Kosovo War in the late 1990s. The chief negotiators from Serbia and Kosovo agreed on Tuesday on a joint working group to oversee the implementation of the declaration adopted in May 2023 by Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti. Of the 6,065 cases of people who have gone missing following the war, which took place between 1998 and 1999, exactly 1,607 remain unresolved. This is according to the European Union's diplomatic service. The agreement comes at a time of heightened tensions between the two countries and is seen as a step forward towards the normalization of Serbia-Kosovo relations. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is traveling to Brussels to meet with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He will also meet with leaders of other European nations, including Poland, and representatives of the European Union. While the topics to be discussed have not been formally announced, Zelensky has said earlier that he will further discuss increasing long-range strike capabilities for Ukraine. It is likely Zelensky's victory plan for the war against the Russian invader will also be discussed, a plan which includes NATO membership for Ukraine. Georgian President Salome Zourabichvili addressed members of the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Wednesday. She shared the challenges facing her nation and warned of further Russian interference. For more, we're joining Sasha Farbach, our European Affairs correspondent, who has more.
As President Salome Zourabichvili addressed members of the European Parliament, the timing and also location means and matters something. Now, it was here in this Parliament in Strasbourg that on November 28th a resolution was passed that very much said that the elections that occurred in Georgia in October were not valid, were far from being free and fair, and called on this Parliament and for Europe to invoke strong sanctions against the Prime Minister of Georgia, in fact many individuals, to make sure that that course changes. Now that set off a reaction by the Georgian Dream, by the government in Georgia itself, that said that accession to the European Union would be postponed up until 2028, which has now led to days and days, almost over 3 weeks now, of protests and brutal repressions by Georgian authorities. Now, in her speech here as well, the president very much highlighted what she called this Russian path of Georgian Dream, making a case and a strong indictment of a litany of things that were there, that have been happening in terms of repressions by the Georgian Dream, to a point where she also said that more needs to be done. So let's also hear what members of the European Parliament had to say about what to do next in Georgia.
Well, we have to look back at on the election results and what was the reactions. I really condemn I think the very vague reaction from the OSCE PA. Some of the leadership said that the elections were fair, which is absolutely not the case. We see numerous cases. There were some election regions where the courts were interfered in actually assessing the interference into elections as well. And the evidence is piling up on that there were manipulation with the election results as such. Based on that, the European Parliament adopted a resolution not recognizing the election results, therefore not seeing the Parliament legitimate, therefore not seeing the Georgian Dream government a legitimate government, therefore not seeing the newly elected president as a legitimate. So therefore the only legitimate president we see is the current president that, well, not the current, but according to the Georgian Dream, but according to the previous presidential elections, that's Madam Zourabichvili.
Now, it is not a failure by this Parliament. This Parliament indeed has called for stronger action. It is very much also said by President Zourabichvili that there should be a wake-up call, that it is in the strategic interests of Europe, that the region matters, that Europe must do more in terms of different areas. She called on doing things for fighting disinformation, also more political pressure, also in terms of justice, so a whole range of points that she'd like to have realized. But ultimately, it will be up to European governments and member states to change policy. But at this point in time, the only thing that Europe can muster is limited sanctions and only harsh words. That's the latest from the European Parliament. Sasha Farbach for TVP World.
Russia has detained an Uzbekistani national over the killing of Russian senior general Igor Kirillov and his assistant. Both men died in an explosion in front of a Moscow residential building on Tuesday morning. Kirillov was head of the radiological, chemical and biological defense troops of the Russian armed forces. According to the Russian security services, the suspect was recruited by Ukrainian intelligence. Kiev confirmed on Tuesday that the attack on Kirillov was a special operation carried out by the Security Service of Ukraine. The day before, Ukraine formally accused the Russian general of deploying banned chemical weapons against Ukrainian forces, labeling him a war criminal. Strengthening military cooperation between Poland and Canada, increasing defense spending and securing the NATO's eastern flank. These are the main takeaways from the meeting of defense ministers of the two countries. Our reporter Paweł Trzaskowski has more.
Increasing military cooperation between Poland and Canada was the main topic of discussions between Polish Defence Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz and Canadian Defence Minister Bill Blair. It was announced that the countries plan to sign a contract on military cooperation for the years 2025 and 2026. Canada already has a significant military presence in Europe, with troops in Poland and Latvia, and is currently looking to expand its military capabilities. When I asked the Canadian Defence Minister Bill Blair about Canada's plans to increase its defence spendings to reach the 2% GDP level required by NATO countries, he said that this is not a plan, but commitment.
It's not only a plan, it's a commitment. And we have said yes. The challenge we face is we have agreed. Canada understands the need to do more. We have agreed with our allies that we are going to do more. The question only for me remains, how quickly can we do this? How quickly can we make those investments? We have to grow our armed forces. We need more soldiers, more sailors, and more air crews. But we also need to acquire some very significant new capital equipment in order to fulfill our obligations to our allies here in Europe and with NATO, but also at home for our continental defense and in other places where we deploy our armed forces around the world. And so there is an urgency to that. And so one of the conversations I'm having with our allies is how we can move forward together more quickly. We recognize that we all must do more on defense. Frankly, I'm always inspired by the leadership that Poland has shown in this regard. Canada understands its obligations and will meet those obligations, and we are going to do everything we can to accelerate the meeting of those obligations along with our allies.
In order to achieve this level of expenses, Canada will first have to overcome some fiscal anchors. But what's already been achieved is rallying up social support for this financial effort. It is reported that the social support has grown triple-fold in the last years. From Warsaw, Poland, for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
And that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.